Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody who has joined us for yet another session of Leadership Storytellers. I am Vishal Gupta, the chairperson of the Ashank Desai Center for Leadership and Organization Development at IIMA Ahmedabad. And on behalf of the center, I welcome you all to our session titled Equal Yet Different, Career Catalyst for the Professional Woman. And I am honored and excited to have with us Ms. Anita Bhogle, who is going to be with us and talk about the book that she's just done and her experiences. So let me introduce Anita to all of you. Anita is a postgraduate in statistics from IIT Mumbai and also in management from IIM Ahmedabad, batch of 1985. Post her degree, Anita has reinvented herself almost every decade. Her early years were spent in advertising, market research, and marketing consulting. For the next 2 decades, she, along with her sports broadcaster husband Harsha, ran a highly successful motivational series called The Winning Way, Learnings from Sport for Managers. The series translated into a book by the same name, which sold over 125,000 copies and started a new genre in motivational speaking. Anita went on to set up BIS Pundits, India's first video learning library for managers, which was eventually sold to an edtech company. A mother of 2 sons, Anita is a yoga and Sudoku enthusiast and an amateur keyboard player. So thank you very much, Anita, for accepting our invitation and taking our time to be with us and share your knowledge and wisdom with all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you for inviting.
I'm also excited to introduce to all of you Ms. Reema Sen, who is going to be with us and moderating. She would be in conversation with Anita and along with me moderating this session. Ms. Reema was a senior corporate banker and worked with ANZ, Grindlays, Standard Chartered, ING, and Kotak Mahindra in different functional and regional leadership roles. Reema has managed some of the largest relationships with corporate India and was involved in many path-breaking transactions. She is a chartered accountant by profession and has held some senior positions such as the Director Global Corporates of Standard Chartered Bank, Head Business Risk, South Asia Standard Chartered, Country Head Banks and Financial Institutions Group, and she also co-founded an NGO called as Aspire for Her. So thank you, Reema, for again accepting our invitation and being here with us to have this conversation. So
delighted to be here and excited to talk to Anita sometime later.
Thank you. So I will not come in between the audience and the speaker, and I now invite Anita to introduce the topic that she has written on and also the recent book that she has written and share her opening thoughts with all of us. Anita, over to you.
So I thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, doing something with the Institute. Brings back fond memories, and I can always pretend that I'm a student all over again. So what I'm going to do today is first I'm going to go through a small presentation. Basically, it's about what the book is about and my motivation for writing it. And also, how I arrived at the title and things like that, because the title seems to have intrigued a lot of people since the book has been launched. So let me just take you through a quick presentation and then maybe we can have a question answer session. Yeah, so as the title says, it's called Equal Yet Different, and it's about career catalysts for the professional woman. Although I wrote the book just over the last 2 years, mainly during the pandemic, this thought or this expression, equally yet different, has been with me since 2004, I think, or 5. And as Vishal said, for over 20 years, we've been doing the winning way. sessions for companies. And the winning way was about learning from sport for managers. So things like, team building, leadership, and things like that. Now, in 2004 or 5, I think we were with the Tata Group. We were doing a presentation to some of their senior executives. And it went off well. And at the end of the presentation, there was a senior lady named Sangeeta Talwar. Some of you might have heard of her. She was, I think, the first woman to be in the FMCG sector, a manager in the FMCG sector. I came to know that later. And she walked up to me and said, I loved your presentation. But there was one slide that really stood out for me. And that was a quote by Steve Waugh, who used to be, captain of the Australian men's cricket team. And in that, Steve Waugh had said, leaders must treat their teammates or their players equally yet differently. What Steve Waugh really meant was, there are certain non-negotiables in every team, which is like honesty, integrity, hard work, discipline, and things like that. So you could be a star or you could be a newbie, but those rules are the same for everybody. But within that, there are some people who are doing well. There are some people who are not doing so well. There are people from different backgrounds. There are people of different temperaments. Somebody needs an arm on the shoulder. Somebody needs a kick up the backside, as they say. So people respond differently to different motivations. So which is why he said that you must treat people equally and differently. And Sangeeta walked up to me and said, "Isn't that so appropriate for women?" And that set me thinking. And I said, yes, absolutely. Because women really at work want a little degree of flexibility from time to time. So flexibility on the input, but no concessions on the output whatsoever. So they want to be weighed at the same scale in terms of their performance, which is why equally are different. And women are, equal in terms of ability and ambition, especially, the women present here today, I'm sure, we've all qualified we are all qualified to do professional courses. We've been through the grind. And yet, sometimes our requirements have been different. Our challenges have been different. And also, I think women are wired differently. We are conditioned differently. So yes, I think I like to believe that equally different is how women want to be treated and need to be treated also at the workplace and at home. And remember, the Steve Waugh statement, came way before diversity and inclusion was on the corporate agenda. So research has, consistently showed that diverse companies are, happier companies, more innovative companies, capable of better decision making, higher on customer satisfaction, and effectively all this leads to higher returns as well, and therefore they even perform better. Having said that, you still have, women dropping off from corporate careers. You don't have enough women in leadership positions who are visible in public life. We have a Naika. Falguni is my batchmate, and we're very so proud of her. But if you look at the VC money that went to startups that were founded by women, it is absolutely minuscule compared to the total VC money that's come in. And even the pandemic, in a way, was harder for women. More women lost jobs, more women had to compromise on their careers. This is the data that's coming from Deloitte. And I was talking to S.V. Nathan, who's the Chief Talent Officer at Deloitte, and he said, they try to have a lot of diversity when they recruit, but this is how it drops: entry level 49%, junior management 27%, middle management 14%, leadership only 9%. So it's as stark as that. So what is really happening here? The fact is that opportunity is not as evenly distributed as ability. So women are just as able, but just don't seem to have access to the same kind of opportunities. And it's not like, nothing has been done. There have been so many diversity initiatives. So companies have diversity targets. The government has been very generous with, maternity leave, which is now at 6 months. It used to be a month and a half, I think, when I had my children. Listed companies are expected to have at least one woman on the board. There are Vishakha guidelines to see that women are kept safe. And yet, all this happens. So the Danda only works on compliance. It doesn't work in terms of inclusion. It doesn't work in terms of equity. So initially it was diversity, and then inclusion and equity got added on. So inclusion really is about creating the right kind of culture. Because organizations started kind of cheating around these targets. So typically you'll find a lot of women in things like HR or, IT services, IT support. Then, women on boards, for example, there is a lot of cheating happening over there, and somehow at least one woman got translated as no more, no less. And although there are women who are making it on merit, they are being termed as diversity candidates. And I have this, very kind of heartbreaking story in the book, where there's a woman from the IIM who says that, companies come and first they recruit the women, and if they don't meet the target, then they look at the men, and then all the men turn around and say you are a diversity candidate. So a lot of this is not in the right spirit. Some of the things are also, I think, not practical. SMEs, for example, cannot, have these diverse, cannot afford maternity leave, for example, because typically people are working for 3-4 years maybe, and then 6 months within that, paid leave, that's very expensive. Or even, like I said, the Vishakha guidelines, they specify a certain kind of redressal mechanism and things like that, which is all very good, but everything comes at a cost, and smaller companies can't afford it. And so one needs to look at it a little more holistically, maybe, a little more differently. Then equity. And how is equity different from equality? Equality really means that, it's the same size fits all. But a lot of people seem to say that, the veil of conditioning is so heavy to lift that, you need certain affirmative action. The younger generation seems to say that, no, we'll be just as good, and so we don't need anything. But of the women I spoke to, the senior women said, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I would have also said that, no, we don't need any kind of quotas or reservation. But it's very difficult. And if we want the needle to move faster, then we need to do certain things, because the pool is not large enough, and we want, people to make it. We need to take some action. There is also the question of, systemic bias, which is different from individual bias. So when I say systemic bias, I'll give you 2 quick examples. There is a woman who's been quoted in my book as well, who said, the day I got pregnant was the day I stopped being talent for the company. So clearly good news at home is not good news at work, because the organization immediately, even before the woman goes on maternity leave, decides that, she's no longer fit to do challenging assignments, that she won't be able to travel, she won't be able to, stay long hours. And she's not being considered for many things way before she goes on leave. So that is definitely systemic bias. They just assume that a woman who has children will be more focused on the home than on work. And that is not necessarily true. There are a lot of people who are sorted, and everybody who is very ambitious will figure out for themselves. So I think the right thing to do is to kind of co-create the decision and the career path for each individual. There's another interesting one about systemic bias, and that I felt very strongly about. When Falguni got an award from Economic Times, she was labeled the businesswoman of the year. And I thought to myself, this is not like sport. Women and women are competing in different categories. So you should really have the same kind of category, and I hope someday that there will be a common award. Then there is, of course, the case of unconscious bias at work, especially, and starting from the non-veg jokes that make women awkward and to mansplaining. Mansplaining is an interesting term where, you know, something is explained in a group. The men take it upon themselves to explain it again to the women, as if, you know, they require some more explanation, or talking over them, ignoring them during a discussion. Then, of course, like I said, you know, decisions made on assumptions without consulting people. It's very stereotypical kind of decision making that happens. And then something I call corporate kindness, because, you know, leaders, senior people genuinely believe that they're being kind and considerate. And, you know, they exclude women from challenging assignments, like I said. So in FMCG, it could be like a factory posting, or it could be P&L responsibility, or it could be, you know, tougher markets if you are in sales. So they feel that, and a lot of times even women think, oh, very good, you know, I've got this nice, comfortable, convenient assignment. What it really does is it disqualifies you from leadership positions. So if you haven't done the hard yards, you haven't ticked the boxes, then when the time comes for you to be considered for leadership, it doesn't happen. So those are the kind of unconscious biases that exist. You know, we talked about ambition. Now, research shows that marriage, maternity, and motherhood and elder care are the biggest reasons why kind of women drop out. There is also, you know, work-life balance, which is a question asked only of women. How are you going to manage? And of course, the question of, you know, trailing spouses. When men get transferred, the woman is expected to go, and most often she even goes along. And when she does that, a lot of times her own career is, you know, at risk, because if typically people go abroad and there are visa issues and things like that. So if it isn't thought through in the beginning, then effectively people are sacrificing their careers. So all these are responsibilities, and all the expectation is that women will, you know, bear most of the burden. Mind you, all these are choices, right? You know, whether you want to marry or not, whether who you decide to marry, how many children do you want? Do you want children at all? Things like that. All these are choices. Finally, at the end of the day, I'm not saying that all choices are of free will, but finally they are choices that are made. And these choices that women make impact their professional careers much more than they do men. So men also obviously make choices, but their personal choices are more personal. They don't seem to affect their careers so much. But for women, they impact their careers as well. And so it's not the ability, as Dumbledore said, it's more about the choices that you make. You know, when we did the winning way, I mean, we continue to do it. Basically, there was an idea that we floated about what it requires to succeed. And we kind of said that there's a universal formula for success, which is a combination of ability, attitude, and passion. So if there is somebody who has reasonable ability and marries that with good attitude, which means good work ethic, you know, being a good team player, giving it 100%, all those kind of things. And then have passion. And you'll see that the best from any walk of life, whether you're a musician, whether you're a sportsman, whether you're a corporate executive, whatever you are, if you have a combination of ability, attitude, and passion, you know, you're well placed for success. And this is something we talked about for a long time. And then I found that, you know, women were getting a bit restless, and as if they weren't absolutely sure that this was enough for them. And through conversations, I realized that choice is really was the fourth angle, because you could have all the ability in the world. I don't think women can afford the luxury of passion. I think ability and attitude, they're all spent. But it's choices that make such a lot of difference. And so that's the fourth angle of the triangle. So we talked about challenges, and let's quickly go through, what I mean by women are wired differently. So Matthew Mott used to coach Australian cricket teams. For a long time, he coached only male teams. And then he, in 2019, he coached the women's team as well. And that team went on to win the World Cup, the T20 World Cup of 2020. And his observation was very interesting. He said, one thing I've noticed is that if you're talking to a room full of female athletes, you say something you think is quite a generic statement, every female in the room will think you're talking directly to her. If you say the same thing in a male dressing room, the players nod and agree and think the coach is talking about the idiot standing next to him. But there's a lesson in this for leaders as well, I think. When you give feedback, for example, women take feedback very seriously and very personally. And so, again, coming back to equally different, I think you need to even give feedback slightly different. At this point, let me tell you an interesting story, an IIMA story. In 2018, we women from IIMA met, for the first time. Can you believe it? 2018. I was moderating the group discussion over there, the panel discussion over there. And, I found that some things had changed, but not too many had changed. And I remember this particular woman who worked for a VC firm, and she was very agitated, and she kept saying that, I meet these women with great startup ideas. And we've given everybody 30 minutes to talk and make a pitch, and they don't even manage to consume those 30 minutes. The men go on and on and on, and talk about themselves, talk about their work. But the women just shy away. So you can imagine, because I came back thinking, oh, this is such an empowered group of IIMA women, and yet you find the same kind of behavior that is there. Again, to quote Nathan, who had quoted earlier from Deloitte, he said that women find it very difficult to showcase the work that they have done, or to kind of stake a claim to their work. So they don't easily say, I'd like to be in this project, or why is it that I have not been included, or I deserve to get this promotion. They still find it difficult. The younger generation is a little better than the older one, but still I think there is a lot of ground to cover. So typically these are the kind of limiting behaviors, and I say limiting because, like I said earlier, people don't realize that in the long term, they are harming themselves and their careers. So poor networking. I think between work and home, there's very little time left for networking. So going to conferences, meeting other people from industry, and that is the world today. That is what work has become. Being on top of your game, knowing people, upskilling. These are the kind of things that are required. And if you don't have time to do those, then obviously your career is going to plateau. And I find this interesting thing when I look at batchmates, for example, and we were batchmates because our careers went in completely different directions. But when I see batchmates also in corporate careers, they kind of started similarly. But after a few moves, the career graphs start looking very different. Women are also guilty of cherry picking roles, like I said, and they go for predictability over challenges, which means that, today I'm saying, oh, this is what I can manage. I don't want to, bite off more than I can chew. And you feel very good at that point in time that, you get your work-life balance and things like that. But if there is no investment made if there are no hard choices made, if you have not selected good assignments, then in the end, you find that you're not qualifying for the top positions. No extracurriculars as well. When I mean extracurriculars, very good at functional responsibilities and things like that, but no investment in communication, for example, and skills like that. Not even financial ability. So women fall short on those kind of things, and of course the imposter syndrome, which is about self-doubt, low confidence. And organizations often find it difficult to differentiate between competence and confidence. So if there is a man who looks more confident, or slightly more competent woman doesn't stand a chance because the guy looks more confident. So things like that are very limiting behaviors, because these are essential skills for leadership. Even those who make it to the leadership positions, find it difficult because the same aggression that is acceptable for a man is somehow not acceptable for a woman. So this is one woman leader talking about another. She says she is an alpha male shaped in a sari. Your leadership model for your default leadership model is male. So when you close your eyes and think about, say, the word leader, you think of a man who's confident, who's successful, who's aggressive, even arrogant, and that is acceptable, but it's not acceptable for a woman. And Rama Bijapurkar, for example, was telling me her theory on why women leaders are seen to be aggressive. She says that you fight your way up the triangle, the pyramid, and only the most aggressive ones survive. Women also struggle, I think, with leadership styles, because I think a woman's natural behavior is to please everybody, to be nice, to be nurturing. But at the same time, they don't want to be seen as agony aunts or mother hens. But they go the other way and they are cool, and because they are cold and distant, that also doesn't work for them. So the need is to be more authentic, and I'm sure that will come with increasing numbers. Sometimes it's the minority syndrome that kind of gets to women. We don't realize, but being in a minority can be quite a drawback. And so if women have to, the numbers have to increase, senior leaders have to pay it back. They could help other women, because otherwise sometimes, women are unpopular leaders, even among women, because they think, the Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi is happening over there. I didn't have it easy. I don't think you should have it either. So that is, there are many mindsets that need to change along the way. So I talked about work situation and bias and things at work. But if you ask me, and I spoke to a large number of women, about 90 women, and diversity experts, HR leaders, people like that. But to the career women, when I asked them what the biggest challenge was, they all agreed and said the challenge at home is bigger than the challenge at work. It's in the mountains ahead to climb that way out, peddling your shoe. And somehow men are just not equal partners. And that is the biggest problem. And so there are many mindsets in society that we need to change. And I'm just going to quickly take you through a couple. And you'll see, you might be surprised by some of them. Yeah, men work for the family and women work for themselves. What does that mean, really? It means that, if women have to go out to work, then they have to look after the home and everything first, and then go and indulge themselves in work. That is the mindset. Sab kuch khatam karo pehle, and then you can do whatever you want. Which is why, so many times you find that when women complain saying, I'm stretched, I'm under pressure, so many people turn around and say, why do you need to work? As if money is the only reason why, people work. And somewhere women also have started believing that, they are secondary breadwinners, which means that the house really doesn't need their money so much. And therefore, I guess somewhere in the mind, even your career becomes discretionary. Along with that, I think the stigma attached to an aborted career is much less than stigma attached to a broken marriage. So if there's work pressure and resistance at home, then women are quite happy throwing in the towel. The I in the we, of course, that this is the legacy of the winning way, where women are great team players, but they somehow just don't. Are you there with me? Yeah. So women are great team players, and they forget they're so involved in the we that they forget the I in it. And then, of course, the most hard-hitting term I think in the book, which is mentally feminist. And every man who has listened to it has put his hand up and said, guilty as charged. I have been mentally feminist myself. What is mentally feminist? Mentally feminist means that, everybody says the right things. I'm very proud of my wife. I support her career. I do all this. But when it actually comes down to, so what do? Do you share the load? Do you give her time to invest in herself? That doesn't happen. As long as the man's career is not affected, he's saying, yes, I support the wife and things like that. We are not bothered about, doing more. And the ugly truth that the longer men work, the more difficult it is for them. And that's the way the world is going today, isn't it? So quick look at what we expect from women. We expect women to see themselves as equal and behave as equals as well. So they must demand equality, but they must not, look for any kind of concessions. No entitlement. They should leave their gender at home. And there are many opportunities where everybody goes through pressure, right? It's a long flight. We ourselves have been in our careers. Mine is like 37 years now, and there's bound to be some turbulence. Now, if you say that you're not going to fly at all because you are scared of turbulence, then that doesn't work. So at the slightest challenge, if you kind of decide to quit, then that doesn't work. And which is why throughout the book I've talked about having a thick skin, because I think regardless of what you do, society has a way, and all children have a way, the colleagues have a way of making women feel guilty and inadequate. And so that's what I would say for women. Men, 2 easy points, but the biggest, of course, sharing the load and giving priority to both careers. Seeing that, when you make every decision to change for a new role or change a job, see that, both are given priority. We expect organizations to ensure a level playing field, eliminate bias. Of course, research has proved that, mentoring and having encouraging bosses is a big thing for women. Not so much for men, but a big thing for women. And a good workplace, I think it makes a lot of difference. Having a good workplace is very high up on the list for women. And in every forum asking, why don't we have enough women? Every possible opportunity, if you can ask this, then it will remain in the collective consciousness of the organization. And that is very important. Finally, what do you expect society to do? Bringing up children is a collective responsibility. Everybody says, babies are to be breastfed. Breastfeed them for 6 months, 1 year at most. Do men take over some responsibility after that? You don't see too many people, right? Men are not even taking paternity leave that's being given to them because there's so much FOMO over there, the fear of missing out, which is there in women as well these days now. But if men took paternity leave, men took more responsibility, which is easier on the women. Then encouraging women to dream aloud. And I think the biggest test Prime Minister Modi has talked about a $3 trillion dollar economy, right? Women don't have and can't participate in that. I think it's a loss to the nation. We're just losing good resources. They are assets to the nation. And if that realization is there, then I think everybody, each one of us will make some effort to change things. Yeah, so that's what I had, a quick one.
Thank you, Anita. Very, very interesting and I would say provocative thoughts and lots of important terms and important ideas that you've mentioned. Rima, would you want to?
Yeah. So firstly, I'd like to congratulate Anita. She has written such a wonderfully insightful book. And every page has at least one line which made me sit up, pause, and think. The book actually, just called out to me. It was such an effortless read. It was a wonderful book.
Thank you so much.
Anita, it was a lovely presentation, and you brought out some very relevant topics out there. But let me start at the very beginning. What intrigued me was your dedication. In your dedication, you kind of write that Harsha's success has been both an enabler as well as a hurdle. Now, I could relate to that, but I wanted to hear from you, what did you go through personally? You also must have had many ambitions after you graduated from IIMA Ahmedabad. So what were the challenges that you personally went through? And what did that motivate you to write this book? Because a lot of it has just come from your heart.
Yes,
So if you could just elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, so the hurdle is obvious, right? Because people know he's never around.
Yeah.
His calendar is married to the BCCIs, and so when people couples say that at least one parent must be in town, and we sync our calendars in that way. And we've never had that kind of opportunity. And so, so the onus of parenting was largely on me, single-handedly, and we didn't have any support in the family. And obviously, my choices therefore were driven by something like that. I'm a postgraduate in statistics. And for the love of math, I did neither engineering nor medicine, although I would have easily got a seat. And then, when we passed out, the statistical software could only be run on mainframes. We didn't have PCs and things at that time. And so, and the mainframes belonged to big companies, and they didn't have this concept of flexi time or part time or anything like that. So, in spite of being a hardcore quant person, I did qualitative research for a few years. So those are the kind of things that one had to put up with. I have lost opportunities to work with some good people, some good companies, all because of this. At the same time, I think his success has opened a lot of doors for me. Of course, I kind of converted that into a strength. And even the winning way, we've done over 600 sessions. So the network is large. So even when I did Biz Pundits, I had the best of leaders speaking for me. And they really didn't, it was a startup. And so nobody even asked for money initially. Nobody asked, nobody raised the question. So it opened many doors, and it gave me a chance to do something very different and very impactful, which probably if I didn't have, if I had a regular career, I might not have done. So that is really an honest statement that it has been both. And, in the winning way, there is a statement that we make. Again, that's something that we have lived. It says, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. And that is a big, that again is a big learning for women, because as Sheryl Sandberg has also pointed out in Lean In, when there is a job description, women focus on what they cannot do. Men focus on what they can do.
Yeah.
So even if it is like a woman looks at a 10-point list and there are 7 things that she qualifies for and 3 things that she doesn't, she says, oh, but I don't qualify because I'm no good at this. Whereas a man looks at it and says, hey, very good, 7 on 10 is not a bad score at all. So, so let me go for it. So it is a big truth. So I couldn't travel, I couldn't work long hours, I couldn't have a regular career. But I didn't really let that come in the way of what I could do. And I really focused on, okay, all this is out. Now what can I do? And actually, Harsha's also done the same thing. So we've lived through that, because he wasn't a player. He was the only person who wasn't a player. And yet he made a success of his career. And this is a huge.
It's a learning, actually. It is a learning about doing. That's right. That is right.
And which is why you see that the book is also very positive. It's not about male bashing. It's about finding solutions, or how do you find your way through it? Because everybody we've talked to has faced some kind of challenge.
So one of the chapters, which is very powerful in your book, that's Dream Aloud. That's really a very powerful chapter for women. And you have said that women do a fabulous job at the current assignment. You alluded that to your presentation as well. But they don't plan ahead. They're not so good at it. And probably it's also because, they're also kind of trying to be very good at their work. They're also busy baking the best cookies. Somebody has asked a question on, childcare. So there is something of the career clock and the biological clock and all that is clashing. What do you advise women who are in those situations, typically women in their early 30s, mid 30s? For example, my daughter's kindergarten teacher, she point blank told me that, why are you working? You should give it up. You have a child now. You should focus on your child. And I know you've also had similar experiences. So how do you advise women navigate in that critical phase, in that critical stage of their career?
Yeah. So Dream Aloud is something that I recommend right from the beginning. Right from when you're studying, for example. And women are typically afraid to state their ambition. Sometimes they just don't know. They haven't given it a thought. They're just going along, one job after the other, or, whatever the parents are advising and things like that. They're just going along. They haven't really thought about it. They don't have the courage sometimes to dream. And there is this realization that your career or your fate, your destiny is tied to other people's. So when you get married, and then when you have children and all that, that is there. Sometimes there is no support from families, and there are many people like that, where there is support, or there's now ambition laced with caution. So for example, 2 days ago I was doing this Twitter Spaces, which is a conversation on Twitter. And one of the women asked me, saying, that's a question that was put through, saying, my parents are saying, don't do finance. Although that is what I want, don't do finance, because you won't find enough qualified boys to marry. And so they are saying, go for an option that is less demand. What do you advise me to do? I said, don't kill your dream. Rather than go for the dream and find the right person. So these kind of things, and therefore it's very important to articulate. If you see the, what I've written about Falguni, and that is one of the things she also talked about, saying that, she always made it very clear to everybody, saying that this is what I want to do. Because otherwise, a woman finds that everybody makes demands on her time. So if you try to please everybody, then all your time is spent doing that, and you don't focus enough. So if you make the set the expectations right, then it becomes easier. So women should be encouraged to dream and also articulate.
I'm so surprised to hear your response, your answer and the question, because when I qualified my chartered accountancy and I was ranked 4th all India, my mother called up all our relatives, and the first reaction my uncle had was that now you have educated her too much. She will not get a husband. That was his first reaction, not happiness, not congratulations, not jubilation. It was just, oh, how is she going to get married? That was his first reaction. And it's so sad that even now, 25 years down the line, we're still having the same kind of conversations.
Yeah, you ask a man, what is it to be settled? And I did this actually. I was speaking to certain companies and I asked them, asked the young men over there that, when you consider yourself settled, so he says, when I have a good job and when I have a home of my own and things like that. And my mother says, abhi nahi shadi karni hai, ladka abhi settle nahi hua hai. But if you ask a girl, every girl knows that to be settled means that you're married. Are you married? So that is still there.
Parents still feel that way, you're right. Now, one of the organizations, that is ICICI, it has been at the forefront of throwing up women leaders. And Mr. Ramkumar, he was the chief of HR there, and you have written about him. He's categorized women in 3 categories. It goes to a lot about what you also mentioned earlier, about the choices that you are making, to not expect anything, don't expect corporate kindness, forget your gender, leave it at home. So what do you advise women? I mean, if you'd like to just kind of elaborate a bit more on the categories of women and how women can make their choices depending on their levels of ambition, for example.
Yeah, so if you notice what Ramkumar said,
yeah,
and he really talked about a meritocracy. He said we don't do anything special for our women. And we ran it like the military. So nobody had a choice. We just handed out assignments and, people did that, really. So those assumptions were not there that, women will go for the softer jobs or they are not that ambitious. All that wasn't there. So that's the first thing. The other thing that he has given the women credit for, especially in the first category, is that, they did not expect any kind of support from the organization. The challenges are there. There is no doubt about that. But they didn't expect other people to solve their problems. They set up robust support systems for themselves. They kind of worked it out and they left their gender at home. So really, that is what it was about. The maternity is the biggest challenge, having children. But that is part of life, right? It's not like a blip on the scene. Life has to go on. And so I think that maternity leave needs to be looked at as something that's temporary, as somebody said, short term, and you're going to go back to work. In fact, that was one of the advice that was given by one of my respondents, and I just thought it makes so much sense that if you think of it as open-ended, then you'll probably never get back. But if you think that, yes, I will do this, and this is my plan after, my child is old enough or whatever, and I'm done with, the basic things for the baby, then I go back to my career and I take help from everybody else. So that is really knowing that, it's temporary. And I think in every career, people have peaks and plateaus, right? Men also have that. And it's not, they don't have probably the maternity bit, but they also have peaks and plateaus. And you really need to enjoy both, and you really need to make the most of both. So if there is a plateau, then you need to kind of upskill during that, or take stock of your career, plan your next move. There's so many things you can do even when there is a plateau. So I think you've got to be smart about doing that.
So equally, when women have thrived in ICICI, despite not being treated differently, it also means that what women need is to be viewed equally in a way that they just need their merit to be recognized.
An equal opportunity.
To be recognized when there are challenging assignments going around, you're also giving the woman a chance. You don't say, oh, she will not. You don't make assumptions, which you're talking about. Do you think that if you were to, you have said that, like leaders also need to treat women equally but differently. Now, how do you think this can be made into a more real movement, going beyond just mere tokenism? Because you just have one ICICI, maybe one HUL, which throws up women leaders. Otherwise, it's more or less, it's still been tokenism in most of the corporate leadership roles.
Yeah.
What do you think should be done? And is there something like in something that institutions like IIMA, for example, can they also do something to change this mindset to make it easier for
Okay.
women to be recognized? I think that's the
Yeah,
question.
I think there are two things that organizations need to do. One is remove unconscious bias, and one is create a level playing field. Now both these are interlinked in a way. But if you look at every policy through a gender lens, then you kind of figure out what is okay and what is not. So, for example, at levers now, there are no team meetings after working hours or late in the evening. As typically teams say, let's go out for a drink.
Mm.
Now they see that as not being gender neutral, because the women struggle to make it to that, right? So there should be other networking opportunities or better timings that suit everybody. So those are the kind of things that and like I said, asking in every forum, why don't we have enough women there? Because a lot of times when promotions are given or hiring is done and you don't have women on the panel, there is this unconscious bias that comes through. Abroad, or maybe some companies that are blind seats where your gender is not shown. Things like that. If those kind of things are done, then I think it'll be great for women. Yeah, you talked about IIMA. Okay, let me tell you an interesting story, because it's at a time when none of you were there. Okay, and I have actually put it in the book. So we were in '83. We arrived on campus, and I was in section B, and I found that there was Guru Raj Kulkarni also in section B. Okay, and everything was in alphabetical order. Everything was a new experience for us. We came wide-eyed, and then we had the tags and everything. Went to classrooms and things. The first day we said, Guru Raj Kulkarni is not sitting next to Anita Kulkarni, because his name tag is Kulkarni GD, and mine says Anita RK into bracket Miss. And so there was absolutely no need for something like that. Right? So this is the kind of unconscious bias that comes through even in the best of places, even where you don't expect it. Let me give you another example, which is more recent, but not in the work context. As Vishal said, I'm an amateur keyboard player. So we are a bunch of corporate executives who play the keyboard. Okay, so we kind of play at parties and have fun doing that. And there was this article in the Economic Times. They found it very interesting that corporate executives should be. This was probably maybe 7-8 years ago, not like 37 years ago, not like the old story. And a nice write-up, and there was a photo of me and another man, and we were kind of playing together. I was the only woman in the group. Okay, all the others were men. That in itself should have been kind of novelty or something to be proud of, but all the men, their IIT, IIM backgrounds were mentioned. Okay, this one from IIT, whatever, I am this one is like, whatever, I am Harsha Bhogle's wife. That's it. Okay, so there is no mention of anything as if Harsha carries my keyboard, which he sometimes does when he's my caddy. But beyond that, he has nothing to do with my music, right? And the saddest thing was that the article was written by a woman. So if you think that unconscious bias is only it's not. Women are just equally guilty, and it's to do with our conditioning. So there's no point in blame game or saying, oh, you're doing the wrong thing or whatever. We just need to sensitize. So that is something that can be done on campuses also. Teachers can be great mentors. Like I said earlier, mentoring is a big thing for women, especially if they come from less privileged backgrounds. Then somebody giving them that confidence and giving them things to say, okay, I think you can do it, you should do it, you should go for it. That is important. The bias is always there. I had requested Professor Pramila Agarwal to join, and I had a brief chat with her over something else earlier, and I was telling her about the book. And she said, 1% of our case studies are women-centered. That is a shocking statistic, isn't it? There are many things that, can be done, because the signaling is very important. What you say to the girl child, what you say to your young woman, what you say to the woman, all this is very important. It may sound to the men, oh, it's not important enough, but it is. I'm telling you, it is.
And I think mentoring can happen at different levels. For example, in IIMA, even you're expecting men and women to be equal, they're technically equally qualified. But as we all know, when they enter the workplace, they're going with different mindsets. So probably to kind of make the women more confident, maybe have some kind of sessions just to make her feel more comfortable in the workplace, or to say, look, these are things that can happen with maybe with women mentors like yourself, who have done it all, seen it all, and you could have these sessions before they join the workplace. Also, I think in the organization, you have mentors, and you also have buddies, like you rightly said, develop a sisterhood. Sometimes women are their worst enemies also.
Yes, yeah.
For example, when I came back from my maternity leave, and my daughter was 2 months old at that time, we just had 3 months, and my mother couldn't travel, so I had to go to Calcutta. So I left my daughter with my mother when she was 2 months old, just 2 months old. I was still nursing her. I joined back my organization as I had committed, but the organization did not keep that space for me. It had changed. My portfolio had been allocated. Nobody congratulated me for joining back, or nobody said, "Oh wow, you've done something. It must be so tough for you." There wasn't even a place for me to sit.
No, which is why this FOMO is happening among, let's say, consultants, or people who are in private equity and things like that. Because actually, 6 months is a long time, and businesses move on, teams move on, and which is why there has to be flexibility in terms of that. There has to be, you need people to read all this and to be aware of all this before they take their decision. Which is why I said these are all choices one makes, and if you know what the consequences are, then you're better prepared.
Rima, if I can just come in,
Sure.
And just adding on to this conversation that Anita, you mentioned women, and my personal thought here would be women are also raising the next generation males also. So I think it is not just about mentoring females, and there needs to be a kind of sensitization that should happen for boys as well.
Absolutely.
And I think I am sad to say I am the only male amongst the three, and I would say that even the next generation boys that are growing up, we are not sensitizing them to. So I have a daughter who plays with boys on campus, but I can see that and it is a very, very educated campus for that matter. But I do hear similar kind of biases being talked about boys of educated families as well. So I think, and the point is that women are bringing up the next generation.
Absolutely. So Rima didn't talk about it, but yes, in the acknowledgements, I have also said that, my hope is, and of course my sons are grown up, but I hope is that they will become better, friends and husbands and, colleagues with all the knowledge that they have now after all these discussions with me. Yes, that is absolutely true. And which is why I said signaling is very important right from childhood, both for boys and girls, that they need to respect, their mothers, their sisters just as much. And Ma Behan ki galis are absolutely not on.
Yeah. Actually, Vishal, just adding to what you just mentioned, what you just said, she has this. Anita has written about this. There's about the senior executive in Sodexo. Now, Sodexo is very gender diverse, okay? And in one of the meetings, regular meetings that they used to have, the CEO found himself to be only one of two men in that entire committee. And then he realized how women must be feeling. He was intimidated because he was in a minority. And that is what women are facing day in and day out. And that fear of, making yourself heard without being too shrill, without seeming to be too agitated, to be too emotional, all those labels that we give women, that is something also that we need to kind of focus on. I think there are a few questions. Just go. So, Anita, there's one question. What would you say women can do to minimize backlash when adopting an aggressive leadership style?
No, which is why I think that, women also need to look at their leadership styles and decide when aggression is right and when aggression is not, and be authentic. The problem is that sometimes you adopt a style that's not authentic because you're trying to ape the men. So yes, women also need to be aggressive because otherwise nobody's going to listen to them. And I've had so many women complain saying that, I'm the leader, but they just don't take me seriously or they don't listen to me. So certain amount of aggression is correct. But the whole thing is that, what is okay for what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. That kind of a statement. That, yeah, it's okay for men, but it's not okay for men. So both sides need to work on it.
One of the topics that you've touched upon is that financial independence and how important it is for women to be financially independent. And I saw that firsthand because last year we had sponsored this community called Not Alone, which was supporting women who had lost their primary breadwinners. And we realized that even working women were not aware of the bank details, of the investments, insurance, etc. You have written some couple of anecdotes, your story. So if you could just kind of share those stories and as to why you think it is important that every woman should be in charge of her finances, her life and finances included.
Yeah, when we've learned to earn, and most women are earning substantial amounts now. So, you need to also know how to invest your money. There are also so many people getting into entrepreneurial roles, and then you need to be in charge of your money. So it is really a life skill. Even those who are qualified and quite capable of looking after their money, don't do it because they just don't have time. And so they trust the husband and they say, okay, I'm looking after all this at home, so you look after the money. But I think it's important to be in the loop, even if you believe that he is more qualified or he is more capable or whatever, because finally, a couple will decide, who takes what responsibility. Still, you need to be in the loop because sadly, when relationships go south, money is the first thing that comes up. And I have the story of a woman from IIMA who kind of earned a lot, worked very hard, and then split with her husband. And she had been a very hands-on person, believed in equality and all that. So, she would pay for the maid and the fees and, things like that. And the man's money was used to buy assets. So a home and a car and, things like that. And when they split, she realized she had no money, no savings, nothing at all. And he didn't even bother to, give her a share of the assets. So two things. One is, generally having a good education doesn't mean that you have financial acumen. And people like me, I think, realized very late that we didn't pay attention to finances. That's a deep regret. Now, of course, markets and all that are there, which, we weren't there in our time. Finance is a very big part of life and business, much bigger than what it was. So that is something one needs to pay attention to. And that education doesn't mean that you automatically qualify for this. You've got to pay attention. So it's a skill. It's something that you need to invest in.
That story hit me hard, really. One of the things again that you have written about is that sometimes, women say, oh, when they're offered a job, so, oh, I don't know enough. I'm not qualified for this position.
Yeah.
Her male peer, maybe knowing 70% of what she does, will be very confident and he will be able to kind of sail through that interview, etc. So you have written about how important it is for women to be able to fill in the gaps rather than, withdrawing from the pressure, which, most women do that. They just withdraw and they just get into their own shell and, what do you think they should be and how should they be navigating this bit? This is a very interesting piece.
And I also, yeah, so I've written about so many women who have filled in the gaps, right? The
Yeah.
main thing is, I think, to realize that there is a gap in the knowledge that you have. Or sometimes when you're going from one level to another, you have to add on more skills. That is when you realize that there is a gap. But you will find that the most successful people first accept that they need to learn and then create some kind of system, whether it is a support system in terms of people who they can learn from, and which is why, again, a network is important. You need to have friends and people who or who you can reach out to, from whom you can kind of learn. So knowledge gaps, skill gaps, all that is there, but those need to, you need to accept and work on them. Like Rama Vijayapurkar said, she had a tuition club, which meant that she could reach out to people. And when she joined the board, especially, she said, there are many things I didn't know, but then it's okay. Everybody doesn't know everything. Yeah. Women somehow are a little more sensitive to that. Even when they become leaders, they want to have all the answers ready. But it's okay to say, I don't know. I'll come back. I'll find out. I'll come back. That's okay. You don't need to kind of, feel inadequate.
Yeah, I think it is time we acknowledge that women are wired differently, and hence we should know that, fine, this is the way we are. And I think coaches there also can help a lot in terms of mindset change, and maybe investment in that is also something women can consider.
Yeah, when the numbers increase, stereotypes will be shed, and there'll be less scrutiny also. The whole thing about being small numbers, and it's not only about gender. Any kind of any community that is in small numbers faces this kind of issue.
So there are a few questions, Rima, if you can take that.
Yeah, sure. I'll just. So.
The first one, Rakesh.
Yeah, he said that about the time commitment. Yeah, Rakesh has asked, how would you say that the time commitment of childcare responsibility factors into women succeeding at the workplace?
Shall we say that again?
How would you say that the time commitment of childcare responsibility factors into women succeeding at the workplace?
No, I think you just need a good support system, whether it is paid help or parents or whatever, to be able to, do well at work. Because unless you have peace of mind about that, because I don't think at any stage anybody will say that, you just let your children be or neglect them or anything like that. They are your primary responsibility. And unless you are confident that you can look after children, I don't think you should have children. Which is something that a lot of youngsters are grappling with, because in their lifestyle and their work, there's no place for a child. But yes, it is a shared responsibility. So you need good support system, and you need a crew. And certainly, as things stand, women need a crew to succeed. So that time has to be given. And like I said, organizations must also see that people don't work late all the time. I don't think it's fair to anybody, male or female. And if organizations expect people to work late all the time, I would think that they are either understaffed or inefficient, or both. So this whole culture of working late, and just because you're working to US time or UK time, they go off on their holidays and they go off on the weekend, and our people are slogging all the time and expected to be on call all the time. I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, sometimes it just becomes a culture. Rajesh Patel has asked, how can one combat with unconscious bias at workplace? And let me just combine that with another question. I think I saw on unconscious bias. Just give me a minute.
How can one come back with any
Combat, combat with.
combat? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Purva has asked, you have advised so well regarding women facing certain unconscious biases from people above them in the pyramid. Do you have any experiences or advice for the challenges that present themselves when dealing with the subordinate levels of colleagues as well? Sometimes one can find herself sandwiched between these unconscious biases from all directions. I think this is about unconscious bias that a woman faces at different levels, and how do you tackle that? Somewhere there is another question related that Anita has asked. While women work on breaking the barriers, how do we create an environment where they're accepted as leaders? I think this is all related, that you are facing unconscious bias from your subordinates, from
Yes.
people above you. How do you get accepted as a leader? What can the corporate do? So these are the questions.
Yeah, I think just assuming that you are a leader means that people are going to listen to you in itself is wrong. But you need to work just as hard and earn their respect. So that is definitely true, whether regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. But sometimes I guess you got to put your foot down and fight the bias. And so in my chapter on allies and enablers, I've talked about, garnering this kind of support. So whenever you see bias, not only should you call it out, but, encourage others to do it. And if you find that there are like-minded people, then, seek their support and return the favor again, so that you can, it's not easy. As it is, if you are in a minority and you're seen to be vulnerable, then it's not easy. But yes, you got to put your foot down, and the numbers need to increase, which is why you need a sisterhood. You need a sisterhood, and you need male allies who are diversity champions. And there are, I find, many people who are now, happy to be that. I find a lot of fathers, like Vishal said, a lot of fathers who want a fairer world for their daughters. So there is hope as numbers increase, as the voices become louder, unconscious bias will go. Sometimes, like I said, and the sensitization programs, because a lot of times people don't realize that is what they do.
So I read a quote, Anita, on what you said. I read a quote somewhere that said that every male should have a daughter. So they should have a daughter. And I think once you have a daughter, you kind of understand what the world is and what she is going to face when she grows up.
Absolutely. And I find this increasing now, this whole realization, at least among the educated. And hopefully, if we keep at it, then definitely, it'll be a better world.
So I've not read the book, Anita, but I just wanted to check with you. Did you, while writing this book, did you also interview males and kind of, or the part males had played in the lives of women who you thought could have done or have done
Yes.
better, and what were some of the things, anything that you want to share?
The first thing is that, a lot of time experiences make a difference to men when they realize. So I've given 2 examples over there where, men made it a personal mission for themselves because somebody close to them was treated badly. So there is a story of, I think, Rishi Gaur or somebody, yeah. So his wife was a star performer and she was in sales. And when she came back from maternity leave, she kind of lost out a lot on in terms of her promotion and bonus and whatever. And she used to work for a multinational, which because of, I guess, global pressure and things like that, normally have better practices. But she was treated so shabbily that he works in another organization, and he was heading that organization, and he made it his personal mission to see that women in his company were better treated, and change in policies and things like that. So sometimes it does help. Women typically don't know how to negotiate salaries, and organizations also sometimes take advantage of that and don't pay them enough. But you find that husbands are now, encouraging their wives to say, stick their neck out and ask for more. They, far more supportive in terms of giving them both the skills and the confidence to negotiate. So things like that. So I think the personal experience, sensitization, a lot of companies have these sensitization programs, and men goes and say, actually my relationship with my wife also improved. I didn't realize that, all this kind of bias existed. And so I'm a better husband also, besides being a better employer. So that's the way forward.
Actually, one thing maybe I just like to add to what both of you have said is that sometimes women just don't, because they're not very good at politics, and they're always worried about going back home at a certain time, etc. They somehow stay away from the informal networks in an organization. Every organization will have these informal networks, and it's important that you forget your gender at home, like Anita said, and you just have to tap into those informal networks, because finally it's a case of selection that happens unconsciously. It is not that there is an exam that you have to write and you're qualifying, and that selection happens based on people who they like. I like somebody, I will promote that person. So sometimes it's important that women also put themselves forward. Shyness, as Anita has beautifully said, shyness is an old-fashioned virtue that has long lost its relevance. So you also need to be a little more out there, interacting with people, networking with people. Networking is actually very, very important. I think that is something that I just wanted to add to whatever.
And traditionally, all the networks have been male, and typically men bond over smoking, drinking, and sport. So if you have 3 crosses against your name, you don't drink, you don't smoke, and you're not interested in sport,
then you lose out. That's true.
Then you kind of lose out. So I don't think you should start on the bad habits, but you need to kind of create other networks.
Create other networks.
Music, for example, is becoming a big network these days. So many people interested in music. So
yes, absolutely.
Books.
I think we've answered all the questions that are there, except that somebody has asked that when can we expect a bias-free world? Manvi has asked that question. Till when it's expected to see a
that depends on you and me, Manvi.
Workplace. So Manvi, you and I have to work. All of us have to work.
Yes.
To see the bias-free.
And do read the book. I think it would be available in the stores.
The book is something that I would recommend to all women, especially. It has all the learnings and insights that I wish I had 20 years ago. So it's a wonderful read, and I think it's also useful. Anita, maybe it's not just for the women. This book is also meant for other stakeholders, the corporate leaders, for example, educational institutions. So who was the audience? Was it just women, or was it for a wider audience that when you were writing this book?
It was for everybody, but obviously it was largely for the women. And I don't know whether Rima and I have given you the feeling that there are only shortcomings that women have. We have a lot of strengths as well. It's just that there are things that are holding us back, and so it would be a shame, it would be a pity if did achieve full potential. So definitely it is, but I've had people come to me now that the book is out and say, actually, I think men should read the book.
I was about to say, and that was also the earlier question that I had asked, which was around uh, the sensitization for males. And I think the books and works like these should not just be limited to females. I think we would be doing the whole work a disservice, and if we say that these are works that should only be read by females. And I would say that it is a big responsibility. Systems only change when everybody becomes conscious, and that is when the system also takes note that something needs
Yeah.
to change. And I think being educated both as females and more importantly males about the whole thing is an important cause that needs to be taken up. And so this book should actually be read not just by females and hopefully by males. And we sincerely hope that more people would become conscious of the issues. And Anita, maybe one last question from my side. Did you see anything on culture and geographies in your work, in the sense, because I would like to believe, based on my reading of gender literature, that these biases are not just limited to India, or it is quite bad in the developed world as well. Uh, so, any thoughts, anything that you found in your work on this?
Well, I restricted my research to India,
Okay.
but even within India, I think you have certain communities, that are progressive and certain which are more traditional.
Yeah.
And a lot of that there is this term called career intentionality. So there is an organization called Avatar that does a lot of work in the field of diversity, and I think they do diversity testing and work with organizations to create indices and things like that. So it's a term from their work which I found very interesting. It's called career intentionality, which means that are you really in charge of your career? Do you kind of plan your next moves, or do you let your career just happen? How easily will you kind of succumb to challenges, or are you quite resilient? Now, all this career intentionality for a person depends on many things, including social role models, professional role models. What is the kind of signaling that happened, which now you'll see that has changed over the generation. So our parents definitely told us that first, though, you will have to look after a home, and it's only then that you can you can't let go of that. But modern day parents are saying go for it. There are so many people who do things like that, and at the same time you have people like the woman I said in the Twitter Spaces thing, whose parents are saying no. They're supportive, but they're not ambitious for the child. So yes, I will pay the fees. I will see that you go to, yes, I would like you to study. I would like you to work. But they're not saying go for the best, go for the most challenging. Never, go to IIM Ahmedabad. In my time, I remember people had asked, you were in Mumbai, oh, you didn't get admission in Mumbai, is it? Why are you going to Ahmedabad? So, people say, no, I'm not sending to this place, I'm not sending there. All these things add to career intentionality. And that's a big difference between different generations, different communities, different backgrounds, all that's there. And which is why, some of the stories are far braver. There is a story of a woman named Arpita, which I find particularly, it really moved me to tears. So she is a woman from a smaller town in Orissa, and she did her engineering at one of the IITs. And you know how competitive it is, and she did it without any kind of coaching or mentoring, anything like that. And then she got admission, or she got calls to all the IIMs except Ahmedabad, which in itself was like a phenomenal achievement. Again, without any coaching, small town, this, that. And then the parents put their foot down and said, no, you've got to get married now, you're old enough. So forget about the IIMs. Get married. And then, she says, I'm dark, I'm not very good looking and whatever. And then she had this whole thing about, guys coming and seeing her and whatever. It didn't work out. And then she went and worked and married a colleague, had to wear the gungat because family was still traditional, although the man was good, had a child. After that, she came to IIMA to do her PGPX and got onto the dean's list. I think, so many glass ceilings broken over there, and what a wonderful story. Huh? Amazing courage, amazing determination, keeping the dream alive.
I think we can just take one last question. Ashwini has written, today corporates are actively trying to bridge the gender gap, which is quite evident in every industry, including the operations industry. What do you think will such initiatives bridge or widen? What do you think will such initiatives bridge or widen the conscious/unconscious gender biases if corporates aren't ready for the change?
That's why, I said earlier about this diversity candidate, for example.
Yeah.
Now, if you do it without being in the right spirit and you just want to tick off a box,
Correct.
then it's not going to happen. So, a lot of times because of this board, when this thing about being on boards came, a lot of fast tracking programs were there.
Right.
So women were like fast tracked. And the men started complaining, saying, you're blocking our progress by, promoting somebody out of turn. So that's not fair either. Even when, women go back from maternity leave, for example, sometimes they go back and have to report to somebody who was their vintage and is now promoted, or sometimes even somebody who was junior is now promoted. Now you look at it from his point of view, or look at it from the point of view of another woman who has worked those 6 months and you've been on leave, right? Now you made a choice to have a child. Now you can't say that I have to get everything. So there is a fine balance between doing all that, and you need to be fair to all parties concerned. So and the person who's going back also has to be realistic, which is why I told the story of Madhvi Puri Bhuj, who lost time and whatever, but now today she's chairperson of SEBI. So women must also think that 6 months is a short time in a career of 40 years. I will be able to make up. So, which is why I said no entitlement, but don't hold back either.
Yeah.
Be a true equal.
Yeah, and that can also lead to that stigma that I am somebody has given me a special. So that is even detrimental for the self-esteem of the individual.
And ghettoization is the last thing we want to do.
Yeah. So it has been wonderful, and lots of emotions and thoughts personally going in my head. And thank you very much, Anita, for writing this book. And I can say that this is a service, and I will definitely get a copy, read it, give my wife to read it, and also maybe share some stories with my daughter who's growing up. And maybe we'll all try to create a world that is better for the next generation females. And so thank you, Rima, also for agreeing to our request. And I can say that you have read and reread the book very, very thoroughly. And so thank you. It was really enriching. Thank you, everybody, for participating, people who have joined us, and for your questions. The whole talk would also be live on our website. It will be on YouTube, and we would also have it on our website. So if you want to see it again and listen to the views, and also please share it in your networks, share it with colleagues who may not have been able to join us during the conversation. We will have the link up on our website for the entire conversation.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you, Rima.
Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
It is a wonderful book. Please do read it. And Vishal, you must put it in the IIMA library. And
yes. That
as part of recommended reading list for all students.
Yes, so that I have already ordered for the library, and the book is, people who are on campus, the book is also in the stores, IIMA store, and we will also be getting the copy soon in our library. And so thank you once again on behalf of the center. Thank you, Anita and Rima, for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Everyone for the
Thank you.
support.
Thank you.
Thank you.